Partnered by Times Influence.
A conclave setting the new age agenda. The second edition of ETAuto EV Conclave 2019 provided a platform to discuss the opportunities and challenges for electrical vehicles in India. In this edition, stakeholders, industry leaders and policymakers came together to relook at the steps taken so far and what is missing in expediting the mission.
Very warm welcome to the second edition of ETAuto EV Conclave. In this second edition of ETAuto EV Conclave, we have moved the agenda further. If you look at the topics, if you look at the speakers, we have gone down to the ground realities. We have brought in the people who are really working out there in the market to understand where have we really arrived in the last 2-3 years when we really started giving push to electrification in India. The world today is moving towards rapid urbanization, with living conditions evolving at a similar rapid pace, while private and public organizations alike are powering this change in the current scenario. The challenge today is to find ways to harness new technology to sustain the momentum. Keeping this in mind, transformation in terms of energy and mobility solutions in the automotive industry is prime importance to ensure that cities are well prepared for future innovations. Electric vehicle is undoubtedly going to be one main candidate in this scenario.
The first inaugural keynote address was given by Frank Mulon from ABB Global Business on the topic Charging Infrastructure to Support E-Mobility.
If we look into e-mobility, we sit here and say, look, this is something really great, this is something really new. Just to boil it down a little bit at the start. It's new, but probably not that new. The technology in itself is more than 100 years old. And the electrons still flow in the similar way than more than 100 years ago. And so coming from trams, or even Ford in Detroit in the 1910s had the first electric vehicle. It's just that a different technology on the combustion engines, the ICE technology, took over. And for good reasons, so not for bad reasons, for good reasons. But now we need to see that we turn it again and come back to a technology which has significantly evolved. We need to have affordable cars. We need to have infrastructure in place. We might need grid enforcement, for sure. And all of that only makes sense if we generate the power we consume from renewable energy. If we look here in India, I understand we have right now about 15–16% of the energy consumption is out of renewable energy. So the target is, I think, to bring that up to 40% over the next couple of years. So that is, of course, great. That reduces the dependency on oil import, but it also helps then to create an ecosystem when you drive electrical to really do something good for the planet. Thank you very much.
The conclave saw a host of panel discussions that set the tone for this edition. The first panel discussion being on policy and industry weighing the contribution.
What exactly do we need to make electric vehicles a success in India? Is it going to be a success? If not, what are the risks? Or what do we need to make it a success? And having said this, Anilji, I would start with you first. Can you let us know a little bit about FAME 2? When is FAME 2 coming?
EVs are going to be there, FAME or no FAME. EVs and the industry has to look forward to have a strategy where the FAME should not be all that significant. The size and the scale which is offered, look at the numbers. And with those numbers and those size, I just say that the government just does not have the sufficient kitty to subsidize the way it should be done. So, as everybody knows, something around 5,000 crores of Indian rupees for 5 years period, maybe doubled. If you double it, it is 10,000 crores. I really don't know. And whatever the FAME has achieved, I mean, just giving a subsidy of 50,000 two-wheelers or some few thousand four-wheelers in a quantum of the vehicles which we are making, 25 million. We make 2.5 crores of vehicles. We make 2 crores of the two-wheelers. So whatever is the quantum, whatever is the FAME 1 or FAME 2 or whatever it is, one has to look beyond it.
Let's assume there's a customer, there's a scooter customer. What exactly does a scooter customer want in terms of subsidies?
Okay, I do agree, first of all, that two-wheelers and three-wheelers is where the population can come, and in a very quick manner, because they're intra-city vehicles, so the range requirement is limited, amount of battery requirement is limited, and it is very much feasible with some efforts to create that population. Now, if you want to create a population of 2 million electric two-wheelers and three-wheelers in the next 3 to 4 years, the support that we would request and require from the government is, of course, some continuation of the upfront subsidies to the customer to reduce the sticker shock, so that we can promote more people to buy electric vehicles of good performance. Today, there is a difference of almost, it's 2x. The cost would be 2x without the incentive. And that sticker shock is difficult to digest for the customer.
Naveen, coming to you, with a large exposure worldwide and experience in different markets, what can we learn in India from the subsidies or from the support or from the establishment of electric mobility in other countries?
To electrify any country, in any country, if you look at, the competition that we look at is actually China, which is about almost a 30 million unit market. It cannot happen without a carrot and a stick approach. We have to incentivize the customers to buy electric vehicles, and that is by giving incentives, by having long-term policies. Even if you talk about localization, there should be no knee-jerk reactions. There should be no short-term goals and short-term policies. You have to give manufacturers enough time to transition from one to another. The second is that if you're talking about localization, say from April onwards, that FAME 2 will only be applicable if it's localization. Where is the supply chain? There is a lot of fence sitting which is happening by manufacturers simply because of ambiguous policies. So if we have a policy and a direction to say that in the next 5 years or 3 years, this is where we want to be, this is the number that we have to hit in terms of emissions, in terms of vehicles on the road, then the whole supply chain can fall in place. Right now, there is some investments happening in the battery assembly, for example, but nobody's really investing in a battery plant, which is going to be the largest part of an EV vehicle, whether it's a two-wheeler, three-wheeler car, or a bus.
Tata has invested a huge amount of money into electric vehicles. You have been the first one who has backed in the tender of 10,000 vehicles for EESL. The first ones, the first 250 cars you have delivered already. The next 4,800 cars are about to be delivered. What is your view on electric vehicles in general, first of all? Or first of all, let's put this. What is the status on Tata on electric vehicles? What are your plans? And I'll come to also your views on the policies in a bit.
I think as far as our view on electrification is concerned, especially in the context of Indian market, it's an imperative. Imperative because of 2-3 reasons. One is that India is the country where we have 14 out of 15 most polluted cities in the world. And that itself is a good enough reason for us to think about electrification in a very accelerated manner. Second, there was a very recent study which was done by Morgan Stanley, which said that even despite a very stringent roadmap, which the government has laid down for the emissions, the particulate matter 2.5, which is the most harmful one, is going to increase by 15 to 20%. That actually necessitates the need for a much steeper electrification in the country. Because of this reason, we believe that, therefore, electrification is going to happen in the country. It's only a matter of time. FAME incentive was not required if we wanted this to happen very organically and incrementally. If we have set a vision of 2030 to have the kind of penetrations which have been laid down in the Vision 2030, we need a lot to do right from now. More on the technology assimilation within the country, as well as developing demand. I think first and foremost, focus has to be on demand creation.
ETAuto EV Conclave also saw the launch of a comprehensive report on automotive fuel, racing towards a multipolar world.
The automotive industry, as we know it, is truly on the brink of a disruption. Stakes are indeed very, very high for almost every stakeholder operating in the space. Governments are committed towards meeting their commitments towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Nearly 70% of oil that's consumed globally is by the transportation sector. So oil companies, which were so far taking a slightly guarded view as far as electrification was concerned, now want to dive deep and understand and participate in the electric revolution. Traditional automotive majors are realizing that they are not likely to control or shape the future of the industry. And it's going to be potentially startups in Silicon Valley, in China, in Bangalore and Gurgaon, or even some of the large tech majors like Google, like Apple, like Amazon, who are going to pave the way for the industry's future.
After the break, a fireside chat and discussion on the evolution of new business opportunities in this space. The second edition of ETAuto EV Conclave 2019 focused on the ecosystem provided for electrical vehicles and how the EV space needs to be given further impetus. The next keynote talked about the importance of being connected, shared and electrified for a new India.
I believe that three things are needed to help the mobility industry achieving its ambitious targets here in India. The one is a thorough, comprehensive, consistent and please tech-agnostic legislative framework, and the need to look at the systemic efficiencies, or in that case, inefficiencies I was speaking earlier. The second is a kickstart to large-scale connected and shared mobility to ease congestion with heavy public transport at the core, with a healthy public transport at the core. The appropriate physical and digital infrastructure must be created. Scalable connectivity solutions based on open standards are the central enabler for the future. And finally, connecting vehicles and infrastructure, providing data, analytics, and maximizing asset utilization. And the third is that the transformation must be done over a time horizon such that the industry and finally the employment opportunities are not disrupted.
With luminaries from this sector, this invigorating fireside chat touched upon whether EVs are the closest solution to make India truly offer sustainable transportation.
Today you heard also Anil Srivastav saying that there may not even be a FAME 2. Clearly he made it very clear that government does not have the capacity or the resources to provide a lot of incentives and subsidies for electric vehicles or indeed any kind of vehicles. So in that kind of a scenario where we're facing, increase in taxes on existing vehicles, no incentives or subsidies available to introduce the newer vehicles and fuel types that we're talking about, where's this going to end up? How do you see it playing out?
So I think this is today a global phenomena. So it's not that India is going to be isolated from it. And I think we have a tendency to think of it as a risk, and there's a large side of the opportunity. You're talking about around 60% of the bill of material of a vehicle, between batteries, motors, controllers, chargers, and on, being changed in the next 5 to 10 years on this area. If you think of us, today India is a small car hub. There was a reason that happened. Combination of policies, markets, and everything that made us do that. It created a great supply chain, and we are very globally competitive in that. We're very competitive in our two-wheeler space today, globally on this front. So I think we have an opportunity here to say, okay, this is a global transformation that's going to happen. India's market requirements are going to be different. How do we actually change this to an opportunity on this area? And if we can create the right solutions for India-centric markets, that's going to work in Southeast Asia, that's going to work in Africa, that's going to work in South America, and we could be probably one of the largest players. So policy or not of subsidies going up and down, if business models can work without that, which is what they should, right, then you actually have true long-term growth. And that's where I think the focus should be from us as a country.
Is there an opportunity to leapfrog also on the taxation front? Why shouldn't we adopt a carbon tax-based regime rather than all these cesses and GSTs and whatever else? Let's move to a carbon tax regime. What's your view on that, Sandeep?
Yes, absolutely. I think when we are, from my perspective, if we are introducing this thing, especially whether you look at electrics or whether you look at hybrids, we must have a common policy with respect to all this, with respect to taxation, etc. Encourage people. It may not be, there was a debate going on whether subsidies or no subsidies, but encourage people to invest, to innovate in terms of newer technologies and create a business model to adapt the future technologies.
The second edition of ETAuto EV Conclave also saw a discussion on the formula behind the chemistry to power EVs in India and an ETAuto chat box, an open and interactive session with EV startups. The EV sector not only poses challenges but offers a plethora of new business opportunities to players in this sector. The final session threw light on just that.
Volvo Eicher Motors has often been credited with changing what was a one-size-fits-all heavy vehicles or buses market in India with introducing specific products meant for specific segments. So do you see a role for such usage-based segmentation within buses in electric?
No, definitely, if you look at the commercial vehicle space, it is going to start with buses, the changeover. The biggest challenge is the initial cost, initial investment that is required for any vehicle which has, because buses, since the size is big, you need large number of batteries, and currently the cost of batteries, it's around $220 per kilowatt, or if you add further other infrastructure, it comes to around $270 or $300 per kilowatt. So even if you have a, say, 100 kilowatt batteries in a bus, so it means you need around 20 lakhs worth of batteries only, then plus motor and plus all other battery management system. So the initial cost is the first biggest challenge. The second is the range, that how many kilometers you want this bus to operate in one charge. And third is the charging infrastructure. So these are the three, big challenges which are currently there.
From amongst all of us, Priyank, you are perhaps closest to how the battery ecosystem is evolving. So where do you see lithium-ion prices, how do you see lithium-ion prices moving in the next, say, 3 to 4 years? What are the trends that you're seeing internationally?
So I think a lot has been talked as well as written about this topic. We continue to see the battery prices falling over the next 3 to 5 years at a rate of about 10% a year. Primarily driven by manufacturing productivity and also changing chemistry to reduce the dependence, like the person from Panasonic talked about. But it is not a linear gradient. What we are seeing is in the short term, lithium prices have shot up, cobalt prices have shot up. So in the short term, in the last 9-10 months, we have seen the prices have not fallen, but we expect them to again start falling a bit. So over the 3 to 5 years, we do see a 10% per annum reduction, but it will be in fits and starts.
For a player like yourself, who has a very successful portfolio of IC engine vehicles, there is the risk of cannibalizing existing sales of your current product portfolio if you introduce electric alternatives. But at the same time, if you do not, you run the risk of someone else taking your market share. So how do you internally debate this issue and decide upon timing for introduction of a new electric model?
We as a company, we decided to be quite full agnostic from that point of view. And we invested at power in diesel application, in CNG application, petrol application. And definitely we foresee electric definitely as a must for a player like Piaggio. Looking also at the DNA that we have behind us. We are coming from a group that is worth to remember that has been the first one to introduce scooter, electric and hybrid more than 14 years ago in the European market. So with this heritage behind us, we are looking at electric application quite positively. We see that definitely there will be a need in the coming period, provided that we are able to overcome some basic, barriers that could, hamper this kind of mobility solution to take up.
So how do you ensure that you as a startup maintain your competitive edge and sustain volumes and grow volumes as you aspire to over the next, say, decade or so?
Okay, so in terms of, clearly in terms of technology or access, right, combined with what we bring to the table is scale, reach. When you look at the aftermarket reach across the country, right? When you look at the manufacturing scale, the supply chain scale, a lot of the startups have not been able to scale up because they don't have the supply chain to back it up. So when a traditional maker combined with a startup comes in, and you can take some of that fast forward and give the consumer, again going back to the consumer and what the market needs, I believe the opportunities are immense. So you need to keep moving towards giving the consumer what he wants, leveraging the old or the infrastructure or some of the strengths you have with the startup capability of being an agile and true to the consumer needs. I believe the opportunities are immense.
As chairperson of the Automotive Skill Development Council, what are the kind of knowledge or skill requirement do you see coming up emanating from the fast-growing electric vehicle ecosystem?
First of all, we did not get too many demands from OEMs in terms of skill competencies and manufacturing sales or after sales. But as an initiative which the Skill Development Council itself took is that we have tied up with some global players in terms of developing both content and the train-the-trainer programs, because we definitely see as a huge opportunity and also a huge skill gap, because the rate at which EVs are growing, it could be very small in terms of percentages, but very large in terms of numbers. And we are absolutely sure that unless this skill gap is addressed at the right time, there will be a bottleneck in terms of the growth of the EV industry if proper skills are not made available across the country.
India is betting big on the EV industry, and it's going to evolve in a very major way, and then we can see the interest that is being generated, a lot of OEMs taking the initiatives, and then India is going to take the pole position in the EV, basically because of the volumes that it promises. And next 5 years, I see EV taking a major market share in the vehicle segment.
It has been a really great event. Right from the start, from the welcome note and the keynote presentations, I think it has been very insightful, not only in terms of the challenges that we face today, but also people offering solutions and practical solutions for that matter.
Concluding on a high note, the ETAuto EV Conclave successfully brought all stakeholders under one roof to create a sustainable and forward-looking ecosystem for electric vehicles in the country.
Partnered by Times Influence.